Hey, I'm Will LaVeist. He's Eric ClaVille. You're tuned into LaVeist and ClaVille, where we give it to you straight the way it is from a black male's perspective, because it's like that. So let's get right to it. The miseducation of critical race theory. So critical race theory has apparently become the most recent political bogeyman. And by that, I mean a tool being misused by certain politicians to misinform, bamboozle, and essentially just scare voters. I say this because many politicians that have been touting critical race theory as this big threat to, society, to education, when they actually are asked to define critical race theory, they never actually even answer the question. So it gives you what is this all about? And so, again, Eric, this is actually critical race theory actually comes out of your area. It comes out of the academics of the law.
Absolutely. And Will, it really first started as a legal theory to understand the laws and public policies of our society through the lens of race and discrimination. Mm-hmm. And it's really examining how these laws came about on our books, dictated by race. Now, I say, this is my theory, I say that laws and public policy are created for three reasons: in its effect or in its intent. That is control and to dictate people, resources, and beliefs. People, resources, and beliefs.
All right.
Under my theory, I believe that every single law that's created, it sits squarely within that particular thought process, where it will control the way you believe, the way you think, the resources, and where you go. Under critical race theory, it examines very similarly all of the laws, as I just articulated, how race played a part in that. So case in point, look at housing laws. Look at laws as it relates to economics. Look at laws as it relates to who is black and who isn't. Right? The 128th rule. The 128th rule said that one drop of black blood made you black. No matter how I'll say blonde or past for white that you are. You're black. So what does that do? Okay, so I'm black by law. What does that do? That now limits my opportunities in America provided to whites because they're white and because the laws and policies were made by white legislators.
Right. So if you're black by law, and to be black limits you into a certain caste in the system, the racial hierarchy of the society, Absolutely. Then you can see how the law and race intertwine and have real impact on people's lives. So let's give people some definitions. So critical race theory, essentially academic approach that seeks to understand how racism has shaped U.S. laws and how those laws will continue to impact, particularly impact and limit opportunities for non-white people, so black and brown, indigenous people. So the grandfather of the movement was actually a Harvard law professor, Derek Bell, who in the 1970s, and he voiced this frustration about how the landmark cases that came in the decade before, U.S. Supreme Court cases on education, on housing, so forth, that they hadn't yet really brought about equality in these areas. So you began to look at, what's going on here if you had a change in the law, but you don't have a change in equality. You still got disparities. And so legal scholars, fast forward in the 1990s, started to develop these ideas and identified a, quote, critical race theory as to understand how a regime of white supremacy and the subordination of people of color have been created and maintained in America. So see the power, the fundamental problem being how, the politics and economic power intertwine and support each other. And certain people get privileged for that. Other people are disadvantaged of it. Now you got the opposition and opposing view, say that let's see, it interpret the fueling of racial division, victimization, and for white students, causing them to feel ashamed
Right.
of their race. But, there's also an academic side in terms of the opposition, right? I mean, that people actually are looking at the merits of the theory and offering, criticism of that as well. What do the fellow academics say?
Well, you have to ask which academics, right? So you have about the last article that I saw, and the numbers may have increased by that time, but about 250 legal scholars, because it first is a legal theory, right?
Right.
But now it's also in other disciplines in the academics. So in history, in anthropology, and other areas, this is being taught. Now, you have those that believe that, yes, this is one of the missing pieces to help understand and unwrap all of this difficult history. Now, we call it difficult, but in actuality, it's tragic.
Right.
America itself, all that is great, it was created out of some events that were horrific. We talk about genocide. We talk about enslavement. We talk about the misuse of labor laws as relates to children, as relates to Asian Americans, Chinese Americans. We're talking about the selling of people as property. We're talking about the abuse of people. We're talking about the stealing of property of people. We're talking about all these things that made the America that we have, which we love and which we adore, and which is an example to the rest of the world. So they believe that the critical race theory is a piece that is missing to understand all that. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, you believe that it's anti-American, that we're starting to rewrite history, that it is Marxist, all right? Because again, the bad C word, right?
Right.
Communism, right? That it is a movement, as you said, Will, to make one race, and more specifically the white race, feel ashamed. But in actuality, it's to understand the whole history. And what I like to say is it is understanding the complete history of our country. Listen, we all have two sides of our family. You got that great side, you got the Ivy League graduates, you got the great families, you got the great preachers and the lineage of individuals who are doing great things. But you also have, in that same family, some people who aren't doing so great. Some people that you don't want to invite to the family reunion. You have some things in your family history that you don't want to talk about all the time. It's the same as our country, Will. We've got great people, great stories, great everything about our country. But there are some stories that we just don't want to talk about. And this is part of it.
Right. And so a big piece that's coming out in this now is that, okay, like you said, you've got these real dysfunctions, this real pain that has been part of the making of this great country that we have.
Absolutely.
And critical race theory seeks to take an analysis of that. You have others who, academics that will honestly answer and say, well, you have that kind of dynamic going on in societies all over where there's pain and there's injustice. And so that does not necessarily mean that what we have here is any different than any of those kinds of situations, even though it may be race. It's still, you got winners, you got losers, those types of things. But what is happening is in the political sphere, it's being used, as I said at the top, as now this tool to, hey, we got this nice soundbite, critical race theory. Sounds like the scary coming out of academia. And you can't trust academics anyway. And now they're trying to use yet another movement to uproot and overturn the America that we know as we've loved it. And one of the things that it kind of, it reminds me of is I think about when President Obama was seeking his first term and you had the eruption of this, what some called a controversy regarding his pastor at the time, Jeremiah Wright,
Yeah.
who was preaching very much in the style, the Jeremiah style of preaching, of pointing out the things in America or things in a society that should be condemned, saying God will condemn those things unless you turn around and turn from your evil ways. Very common style of preaching,
Right.
coming out of the Black liberation theology and discipline of which he came out of in the 1970s when he was in seminary. And so now they jumped on that as Black liberation theology. This is the thing that is to what is this thing that we've never heard of and so forth. When Black liberation theology is really ongoing. This is Black liberation theology is no different than what Richard Allen was preaching about that founded the AME Church, or what Harriet Tubman was coming from a Frederick Douglass. It's about how the gospel speaks to freedom and justice, and that we as a Black people have a unique cultural context and framework in which that fits in. And so it's how we use these tools of academia, these theories, these things that are designed to try to help us understand the society that we live in. Absolutely. And the injustices and become better. You see that once it enters into the political realm, where people have agendas and they're really trying to advance their own interests, they're able to use these. Now it's critical race theory. Use these theories, use these things as ways to drum up support, ways to rile up voters and actually misinform people.
Absolutely. And Will, you bring up a very important point about the politicizing of this very important tool to really uncover and unwrap, the history that we haven't been taught. And I want to mention something about Pastor Allen. I think that Pastor Allen of the AME is a figure in history that we need to really delve deeper into and understand.
Amen.
His influence upon African Americans post-freedom is tremendous. But there are a lot of African Americans who have helped to shape not just the minds of the people that they influence in their circle, but really helped to shape the times. Right. And spoke a lot of words and teachings of upward mobility.
That's right.
Of African Americans and of America. I know Booker T. Washington is one of them, but we're starting to uncover a lot more. Katherine Johnson, the great scientist, mathematician, who we're starting to uncover and understand the hidden treasures of NASA. But I wanted to make that point that these are the types of heroes and Americans that the critical race theory will help to uncover and unpack. Right. Why is that? Because Katherine Johnson was great because she was brilliant. She was a mathematician. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, her accomplishments were even greater because of the oppression, discrimination, suppression put up on her while she worked for NASA. Now, she could have folded. She could have threw in the towel many times. But she was so good under pressure, unwarranted pressure, that even the men who were going into space said, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not going until she checks it. I'm not going until I hear what that computer says. But if she says go, then I will go thousands of miles outside of this Earth's orbit because of that Black woman.
So to your point, one of the things that's happening is we have a lot of politicians in certain states, Oklahoma, Louisiana, North Carolina are examples, Texas, of course Texas. They're always doing something in Texas, who are pushing bills that include language that's about trying to prevent the teaching of critical race theory. And the interesting thing about it is that they're pushing bills concerning K through 12 education.
Yeah.
Critical race theory, like you said, is something that they taught you learned about in law school.
Right.
And so it just, again, shows you how it's being used as a tool to actually do something that is another agenda that's going on, which is to prevent the desire to have this deeper dive into honest education about the racial history of the country, how things developed, what really happened from multiple perspectives, telling the indigenous story, telling the brown, telling the black story of how this country came together because of the Pandora's boxes that it will open to see the levels of injustices that have occurred. And how, and then obviously the next thing will be, okay, once we learn of the stories, once we learn of the policies, including government policies that are actually done, the next conversation is going to be, well, how do you remedy these injustices that were done oftentimes by our own government? So what you see is that it's a strategy about not really getting to the truth of how we became America. So if you don't really get to the truth of how we became America, you can perpetuate the lies, you can perpetuate the myths and misinformation for generations to come.
That's the key, Will, to continue to perpetuate and protect the lie. There's an article that just came out, and we're going to unpack it and wrap it in another segment, that talks about how the white male minority is ruling the majority of policies, economics, not just in government, but in business and the like. And we also there's been discussion about, and actually real dialogue that was caught on tape, doing an argument, a court proceeding, legal proceeding, which basically the Republican side admitted, or conservative side, Republican, however you want to categorize it, that the voting laws is all about protecting our vote, protecting the laws, right? So no matter what we, figure out or say it is, that's the reason why it's there, right? So I think that there's currently, I believe this wholeheartedly, that you have a shrinking minority rule in our country that is believing that their power is slipping away. And I believe that education is the key to open up all doors of equity and equality. And if they allow this, then they believe that their hold on power will be in jeopardy.
Now, here's why what you're saying is important and how it plays out for generations to come. So there's a study out of Skidmore College, published in American Psychological Association. And it reports that infants and toddlers are often aware of race and can display racist beliefs from their young age. Infants and toddlers. Yeah. So we often think that, racism shouldn't be taught, or anti-racism shouldn't be taught until age 5. But they have studies showing that, with the developmental abilities and capacity, even in infancy, they can see differences in race. So if you teach, right, that talking about race and racism is bad, right? And we know that we have the capacity, even in toddlers, have the capacity to understand racism or to see differences. And we're already indoctrinating people to the mindset that even to talk about it is bad. Then you can already see that there will be, once somebody develops and becomes older and more cognizant and more, that there won't be any desire to do anything about undoing racism, about changing. So if you taught that is bad, we know at a young age you can understand race differences. Studies are starting to show that. Then as you develop, you become teenagers, you become adults, there would be no desire. And in fact, there will be a total resistance to even want to engage it and do anything about it. And even think that, want to be even open to the fact that racism still exists. So we're talking about something that potentially can really lock us in as a society where we really believe this lie that there is some difference in your intellectual capacity and your ability to achieve things as a human, that in your rights to be able to have life, liberty, pursuit of happiness on an equal playing field, we're at risk of locking it in that no, there was going to be a permanent caste system based on skin color, which is a total lie. I mean, skin color, melanin in your skin is no more significance than the color of your hair or the color of your eyes when it comes to the ability of you as a God-given ability as a human being.
But I think you mentioned something that's key. As the ruling majority becomes a minority in our country, now we get to what's called, as you said, a caste system. Mm-hmm. It's a different type of discrimination and different type of order in society, but it still puts those who are currently the majority at the top.
Yeah, we certainly have it now. I mean, we have it economically now.
Right, exactly.
And it existed when we had slavery. I mean, it was a caste system. There's a pecking order based on race. So yeah.
But race played a part in that. And you're exactly right. We do currently have an economic caste system. Right. However, even within that economic caste system, race plays a part.
Absolutely.
So now, when we, as ruling majority shrinks into the minority, then to remain the majority, remain the ruling, or to become the ruling minority, a caste system has to be created. And I think that's what we're seeing. I think if you look at popular culture, I think if you look at the person that's fair skinned, is always the one that's the leader. If you look at the one that's darker complexion, they're the ones who are in the back supporting the quote unquote supporting cast, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at
unless you got the movie Black Panther. Now that we had a breakthrough there. Yeah.
But Will, think about that. Black Panther is the largest grossing Marvel movie in the history of Marvel movies. Not that year, not that decade, the history, right? But we're still making other Marvel movies at an alarming high rate, okay? So at some point, economics makes sense, but if economic sense overrides the lie, then we're going to default to the lie. Right. Because there's a greater desire to keep the lie going, because it's bigger things that are at stake. But you mentioned the caste system. Take a look at other countries that have caste systems, such as the country of India.
Yeah, my God.
The egregious beliefs of some people that God made are even untouchable. I mean, you can't touch them. Think about that. That is for another human being to say, we're all created by God. We all come to this earth naked we should leave. And to say that because you are from this family, or because you look this way, or because you're from this tribe, you now are part of this system, right?
And in India, it's interesting that you talk about India, because in India, the caste system is now illegal, but still very
right
much practiced. And exactly. this goes at the core of why, and it's why I said at the top, miseducation of critical race theory, because this goes at the core of what the theory desires to explore, is what is the relationship? How is this intertwined? How does it feed? How does it establish and then also feed and perpetuate? Because clearly there is some kind of interaction that is going on there. And like you said, when you talk about India, the caste system, they have legally, that's been abolished. But in reality, it is very, very real. And you see it play out. You see even the impact of skin color in that society plays out. And so what do you think will be the case as more and more people come to America with these kinds of concepts and ideas?
That's right.
What will it mean in this country as well?
Well, I think it's in mentioning what you just stated. Policy dictates practice. So you have laws, public policy, but then you have practice. Practices are not eliminated by the stroke of the pen. they're eliminated over the course of time. I give the example of the children of Israel when they were, the biblical story, when they were freed after 400 years of bondage. But there were some practices, that they couldn't take with them on a 3 days journey to the promised land. But they kept doing it. So, unfortunately, the only solution to cease those practices before individuals can actually go and live in a land that was promised to them and live greatly is that some had to die. So a journey that took 3 days actually took them 40 years to give them a chance to actually die.
My God.
So in looking at that story about the journey from Egypt into the promised land and the practices of the people and the beliefs, we now utilize that and equate that to what is going to happen here, which is why critical race theory is so important to be taught, and which is why the opposition is starting to try to seize it in K through 12. Because by the time the K through 12 become 21, 25, become 30, become 40, the practices of systematic racism will become something that no one will want to be a part of because of the teaching of truth as opposed to perpetuating the lie.
Yeah, but I think that the other nuance that people need to pay attention to is, as we said at the top, critical race theory is being used as the bogeyman to really undermine the teaching of honest history and how race has played out in our country. And they're just using that as here's the new evil, and we've got to confront this evil. But the new evil is really an old evil that has been with us, and that's racism. And we're never going to be the great nation that we can be without eradicating that.
Well, 2 points I want to bring out. I know our time is leaving us with this segment. There's so much to really uncover and unpack with this. But 2 things. In order to make this theory more acceptable, because of the boogeyman principle or technique or tactic, is now we're looking at critical radicalization theory as opposed to critical race, because now it's like race is a fighting word. So you take that away. I've also heard this utilized as relates to not white supremacy, but the term is used when whites have an advantage over
white privilege.
White privilege. Yeah. Thank you so much. So I've heard that in order to take away the fighting word of white privilege, now persons are using majority privilege. But again, I think that those 2 characterizations of a very important area really fails, because white privilege, majority privilege will now become, as we discuss, and we'll unpack it in another segment, a white minority, ruling minority privilege. So when we say the ruling minority privilege, as opposed to the white ruling minority privilege. Also, lastly, I want to close with this. Teaching the truth of history is not about blaming the person next to you.
Right.
It's not about demonizing one group of people against the other. It's about understanding the truth, taking that truth, learning from it so that we can make better decisions for tomorrow.
Amen. We all want an opportunity to pursue life and happiness. And that's all of God's children, all races, all people are deserving of that opportunity.
And Will, I think that's a perfect way to end this segment. We want to thank all of you again for supporting LaVeist and ClaVille, where we bring it to you the way we see it, straight from the truth and honesty. Again, if you like what you're hearing, like, share, follow us on our social media on Facebook, and also comment. Let us know your thoughts on what you liked about our segment, any questions you may have, how we can better talk about these issues that are important to you. Until next time, that's the way it is. From LaVeist and ClaVille, we'll see you next time.